Hey girl, do you wish you could make your healthy habits stick, but life keeps getting in the way? Are you tired of diet culture telling you to shrink yourself when you'd rather just find true food freedom, move your body for joy, and feel and look good in your favorite leggings? Then you're in the right place. Think of this as Atomic Habits for women. Hey, I'm Emily Nichols, habit and fitness coach, millennial mom, and Taco Tuesday enthusiast. I'm here to tell you there is an easier way than what we've been taught about health and our habits. How do I know? Because I've gone from former chronic dieter to habit hacker through the power of the system that I'm now going to teach you so you can finally stop dieting and just train for life via your habits. Remember, it's not your fault your healthy habits haven't stuck. We just have to do them differently. Are you ready to habit hack your health? Then let's do this. You're listening to episode 235 of Habit Hack Your Health. Hey friend, welcome back to the show. Hey, thanks to everyone that was able to access for free our last habit hacking masterclass all about emotional eating. I sure did learn a lot from our amazing contributors, and the feedback I've gotten from you all is that you have as well. So thank you so much for joining us. It is available in the Habit Hack shop now, but it is a paid masterclass now. So go check it out. It's audio only, and there are free gifts from each of our contributors as well. And our previous masterclasses and future masterclasses after they drop will be available in the shop for you forever and always until I decide maybe they don't need to be in the shop. So our next that masterclass will be later in the spring, and that one will be focused on our movement habits. And I'm already brainstorming some amazing contributors for that as well. So hey gang, just a reminder, the Healthy Habit Reset is coming up this Wednesday, the 24th, at 12 p.m. Eastern live. This is year 2024. If you're listening to this and you're like, this time has passed, no worries, girl. You can always grab the master class and watch or listen to it on your own. But I love doing the Healthy Habit Reset with you. I do this 4 times a year. It's just a free masterclass or workshop to really help answer the question I get a lot, and that is, where do I start in making my habits stick? I hear from so many of you, you're like, I can start a habit, but it never sticks. And I think we just need something a little bit more simple and catered towards us, because guess what? Life will get in the way. New seasons of life come and go, and you are changing as a person and as a woman as well, especially if you're a millennial mom like me. 42 is way different from 32 and 22 for sure. So come join us live. Sign up at bit.ly/free reset masterclass. It's available in the show notes as well. Even if you can't join us live, sign up so you are able to get the workbook. I have a habit tracker included in it, and you'll also get the replay, which will be available as video and audio only if you need that option. But during the masterclass, in like 30 minutes or less, we'll talk about actual like Atomic Habits for Women 101. I have a 5-step system to help you change your habits and pivot them for any season of life that you may be going in. We're going to debunk diet culture, thinking about a health first, then weight loss mentality. And then I'll share some next level habit strategy with you with some of my favorite and most useful and strategic habit hacking tools that are catered towards us. So it's not your fault your habits haven't been sticking. We just need to get a little more creative in the way we're using habit strategy, and that is exactly what we're going to do in the reset together. And spoiler, I always include some type of fast action bonus or discount code if you want to accelerate your results a little bit more and get into my signature program, the Healthy Habits Accelerator pod course, where I take you through habit hacking some of our most well-known challenges when it comes to food freedom, mindset, and movement, but also I give you a 21-day plan to help you make those habits stick. It's amazing. I'm so glad we switched to a pod course only, because as women, we just need that atomic habits from women philosophy and method and everything that we do. So, okay, let's get into today's episode. I'm so excited for you to hear from our guest, Katie Hake of Fit Friends Happy Hour. I've known Katie for a few years. She's local here in Indy as well, and I've known her through Orange Theory too. So today we're actually going to talk about Katie is a registered dietitian. She's been in the fitness industry for a very long time as a trainer and educator. But today we're talking specifically about intuitive eating. And you've probably heard of intuitive eating. You've heard a lot of folks talk about it. If you're like me, when I first heard about it, I felt a little intimidated and confused by the term, if I'm being completely honest. And I think that's really just due to my own past chronic dieting and diet culture mentality and what I've been exposed to since I was like a little girl, right? And it was very intimidating. And then it was like, well, aren't I going to overeat when I eat all the things? If I'm intuitively like, yeah, I want this whole package of Oreos, let's go. Or maybe you're just unsure of what it really is. So, at its core, the definition of intuitive eating is a non-dieting approach to changing your eating habits, right? Intuitive eating is about trusting your body to make food choices that feel good for you without judging yourself or the influence of diet culture. A non-dieting approach really lines up with what we teach inside of our signature program, where it's a health first, then weight loss second, training for life mentality. And as you'll hear from Katie, she really has a non-diet approach as well. So today we're going to dig deeper into those non-diet habits with intuitive eating and with Katie. So let me tell you a little bit about Katie. Like I said, she is a non-diet dietitian and fitness professional with a passion for helping women to stop dieting and start living. Yes and amen. I love that. She works with women to eliminate the rigid all or nothing mindset and replace it with one that celebrates life's small wins to let them grow. Through both nutrition and fitness coaching, she empowers women to become the expert of their own bodies. She's also a certified intuitive eating counselor, international fitness instructor, and host of the Fit Friends Happy Hour podcast. We'll make sure to link all things Katie in the show notes so you can connect with her as well. But she's really going to break down how to create non-diet habits, changing your mindset first and foremost, and really leading with what she calls a gentle nutrition focus. Doesn't that sound nicer than like dieting and restricting? I love that so much. This is going to really allow you to honor your body, your health, and your taste buds too. No restricting here. So we even chat about habit loops that you have around, dieting and your body image and how to change those loops. We have to incorporate some habit strategy for you. So this is a super educational episode. Come with an open heart, open mind, ready to take some notes. And this is a really refreshing look at intuitive eating and will probably help you feel empowered as well. So get your pen and paper handy. Let's go chat with Katie Hake.
All right, gang, thank you so much again for tuning in to Habit Hack Your Health. I am so excited to talk with my friend Katie Hake of the Fit Friends Happy Hour podcast. Katie, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Emily. I'm excited to be here.
Same. So Katie and I know each other from the Orange Theory world, but we've never sat down and done a podcast swap together. So I'm really excited to dig deeper into finding food freedom, intuitive eating. But before we get into all of that, Katie, the first question I ask every guest is, what is your favorite habit hack? It could be something for yourself, your kids, self-care, food, fitness, way out there. What is your favorite habit hack?
I love habits, and I am like continuously always trying to learn new habits. Like it's one of those topics like habits, goal setting, I could just read about, listen to forever. So I think my biggest habit that I consider a hack, or my favorite, is like habit hacking fitness. So whether it's, listening to a podcast and cycling, sitting on the elliptical and ordering groceries, cycling and catching up on email, so it's things that I'm doing like during fitness, but also stacking on top of it. So Like fitness is so often a trigger for me of like, okay, finish your workout, do your Bible app, or finish your workout, write your to-do list. Like I love stacking and attaching things to my workouts because your brain is just in such a creative and like dynamic mode.
Yeah, totally. I would say that's one of my favorite habit hacks too. I actually just posted a story earlier on Instagram. I was walking on my treadmill and stacking, listening to a podcast that I needed to edit for later. That I was just listening back to the conversation. That's my favorite way to like re-listen, and like it's the best. It's like
It feels like the best in multitasking. That's actually efficient.
Yeah, it's efficient multitasking. Yes, yes. That could be a whole episode in itself. I think we have done an episode on multitasking versus habit stacking. But nonetheless, Katie, let's get to know you a little bit better. Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, kind of your story as far as what has led you to what you do today, and most importantly, who you are?
I could go on for hours. So how do I condense it? I guess, where my story really starts is I fell in love with group fitness at a young age. Like I was sneaking into the YMCA with my sister when were too young to be doing classes, step aerobics, fell in love with turbo kick, and not just the choreography and the movement itself, but also just the environment that came along with fitness and group fitness, being able to step inside a room and connect with others, not having to talk, but it just felt like a really positive and uplifting space. And I loved it so much that it, went into college and definitely took it to the place where it became obsessive. I fell in love with fitness and actually started to study that in school. I studied nutrition as well, and got into teaching group fitness, got into personal training, and really started to equate my success in the industry with the size of my body, thinking that, okay, I'm only going to be quote unquote successful in this field as a trainer, as a, fitness educator, if I look a certain size. So I need, in order to do that, right, we've often been taught for many years is that I need to move more, I need to eat less. And so taking it to the extreme, teaching multiple classes per day, but on top of that, trying to get in my own workouts, hiding, marathon training or training as like you wore a badge of honor of this is who I am, this is my identity, when really, if you peeled back the layers underneath, it was a way of control and not being confident in who I am. And so, fast forward as I kind of went through my own healing journey, if you will, I discovered intuitive eating approach while I was also working in a clinical setting in bariatric surgery. So working with patients who were undergoing basically surgically altering their anatomy for the means of weight loss. And I got into really this fork in the road of, oh my gosh, like an identity crisis almost of what do I believe? What do I want to practice? Because my work is very much tied to my purpose, because I have a true fulfillment for what I do. And I finally got to a point of like, I don't want to practice this way anymore. I want to be in a space where I can spend more time with patients and clients. I want to have more flexibility. I don't want to be teaching group fitness and personal training at 5 a.m., going to a full-time job, till 5 p.m. and then going back to the gym. It was just too much. And I hit burnout physically, mentally, emotionally. And so from there, I worked a few other clinical jobs, and then I opened my own private practice, which really allowed me to focus and specialize in not just this intuitive eating non-diet approach, but also joyful movement when it comes to exercise, moving your body in a way that feels good, but also body image. I found that, the nutrition piece, the fitness piece, and then also the way that we view our bodies are all so intertwined with a lot of the clients that I work with. So went into private practice, did that full time for a couple of years. And then I've always still stayed in the fitness space, but now I also work full time in the fitness industry as an international educator. So I help support fitness trainers. I basically train the trainers and support and mentor them across the globe, which is really fun, kind of being on both sides. But that is my story in the shortest way I can tell.
I know it's always a loaded question. It's like, okay, well, where do I start? Well, and thank you for sharing that with us, because I think that's really important to note, because I feel that so much in my soul as a fitness trainer as well, being like, I have to look a certain way or perform a certain way. And that's not the case. That's not the case. It's more about what motivation can you bring? How can you inspire folks, keep them safe, and get them to feel the same way about themselves as well as we want to feel about ourselves too. But I know it's tricky and it can be a slippery slope for sure. So thank you for sharing that for sure. Well, today I really want to focus on food freedom, and in particular, a concept that you have called gentle nutrition, which I am very intrigued by this. This really speaks to me. I really coach our clients on a concept of food freedom, which for me means, okay, being able to eat colorful foods and fueling my body, but also fueling my soul with like tacos and margaritas as well. That is like my definition of food freedom. And I know for me, when it comes to food freedom, it has to do more with my actual habits versus what I'm putting on my plate, or constantly thinking about my meals. And I was wondering if you could explain that a little bit more. Give us some examples of what gentle nutrition really means.
Yeah, and thank you so much. I wish that I was smart enough to come up with the concept, but it's actually not my words exactly. I'll give credit where credit is due. The concept of gentle nutrition is actually comes from the intuitive eating principles. So there's 10 principles of intuitive eating, and this is a framework that was developed by two dietitians. Gosh, I think back in like the 90s. So it's really not anything new, but this concept of gentle nutrition is really choosing foods that not only honor your health, but they also honor your taste buds, right? You eat them because of the way they make you feel, to your point, mentally, physically, emotionally. And so, perfect example of that would be, let's say, we're about to record this podcast. I've got work calls stacked up after this. So I know it's going to be a big chunk of time where I don't have access to food. So I'm going to make a decision around food. I'm going to choose something that has some protein, that has some fiber, that I know is going to keep me full a little bit longer, knowing, that I have XYZ. It's gonna be something I enjoy, but I'm also going to be intentional about the actual nutritional value of that food, because it aligns with my values.
And how do we go deeper into that and figuring out what are our values and how can our food help support that?
I love that question. I think a lot of people don't know what their values are when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to their health. What's important to you is very different what's important to me. Right now, I'll speak for my own example. I am in the season of life. I have a 6-month-old, and life's just crazy. So, convenience is high priority. That is one of my values when it comes to nutrition. And so for me, picking a frozen meal, or sometimes even getting a form of quote unquote fast food, like that is my definition of gentle nutrition, because I'm in a space where it might be that, or skipping a meal completely and not nourishing myself because I'm powering through trying to get a little one to bed. So it's taking a step back and going, what's important to me, recognizing that priorities shift, seasons shift. It might be, let's say you have a family member who has heart disease, right? Maybe that runs in your family, or someone in your family has diabetes. What you value in terms of nutrition. There's so many things that nutrition can benefit us with. It's picking and choosing what really matters to you.
I think that's so important for our audience to hear and sit and think about that for a moment. I know when I started my own healthy habit journey, for me, it really started with food, because I realized I had a lot of habits around food that weren't serving me, that were not making me feel my best. And I wasn't being a patient or present mom. And I was dealing with a lot of that via the way I was eating, which wasn't serving me. It was not making me feel my best. So I took a step back and was like, okay, what can I do to fuel my body? So I am more patient. So I am more present. So
Mm-hmm.
I have more energy without restricting myself and feeling like I'm dieting. Well, and as that journey has, progressed, when I started that, I was like doing these big, like hashtag meal prep Sundays and like having all the containers. And I love a meal prep for now, but now in this season of life, like I'm like mom Uber all the time. All I do is drive my kids around. So for me, it's a convenience is a value. Like when you said that, I'm like, I know the ladies listening, convenience is a big value of theirs as well, because I need to kind of plan ahead and think, okay, every time I make a meal, I'm throwing extra protein in the oven. That way I have extra the next day where I can throw together an easy meal and feel, fueled and patient and present now. But I had to change for this season of life that I'm in. And I feel like that's kind of where we fall a little short, is we maybe get into a routine or a habit, and then something happens. We get a new job, our kids get older, your season of life changes, and then you just don't do anything because you're like, well, that's not working for me anymore. So how would you suggest pivoting those habits around your food based on the season of life that you're in?
Yeah, I love that you asked this question, because I think it's so common, especially as women. We believe that eating and nourishing our bodies, or we believe that eating or making a change, whether it's a habit or behavior change, we correlate that so closely, whether we know it consciously or subconsciously, we correlate that so closely with dieting, right? Due to diet culture and the society that we live in. And so pausing to really think about, what I want, that can be really scary for a lot of people, because it's going, okay, I'm giving myself permission to make a decision around food. And maybe depending on your history, you might feel like you're not able to be trusted around food or trusted around those decisions. So gosh, there's so many strategies that one could take, but I would just encourage listeners to really just pause and ask yourself, like, what's the alternative, right? Because you have so many options, you have so many choices, but the lack of making a decision, the lack of those choices is often what takes up so much brain space. That indecisiveness is what often leads to the chatter. So I would just, encourage someone to pause, maybe make out a pros and cons list, and just decide. And everything is an experiment. Every eating experience is a learning opportunity.
I think that's important to note because, yeah, I feel like we as women, we're so ingrained in diet culture, like you said, whether we realize it or not. When we feel like we're like, oh, I'm changing the way I'm eating, we think it's, oh, it's because I'm dieting because I want to lose weight or be a certain size, when really it should be a lot more about like, how is this going to give me energy? How is this going to help me, get through the workday? How's it going to help me, if my baby's up in the middle of the night? There's so many different ways to look at it without that diet culture lens. I feel like a lot of folks are talking about intuitive eating, and I love this so much because it's not about dieting. I really feel like it's so personal to you and it's not restrictive. But I also think a lot of women listening and folks that I've had conversations with, they're intimidated by the concept because it's like, well, if I'm doing like intuitive eating, I'm just going to eat all the things, right? All the things I could ever crave or want. And then I'm going to gain weight. And I think for some folks, that's a scary concept. So how can we kind of debunk what intuitive eating really is so we can really enjoy the benefits of it and live a life of food freedom where we're not waking up first thing in the morning thinking about our bodies and what we're eating, but more so waking up and thinking about how can I have energy today?
Yeah, having a more positive outlook on food. That is such a common, number one, a common myth around intuitive eating, but also a common fear. And part of that is maybe related to one's experience around food, right? Maybe you've been in a place where you've said, F it, I'm just going to eat whatever I want. And you've had that experience of overeating or, choosing foods that don't make you feel good, or, end up causing you to eat past that point of comfort, resulting in weight gain, right? So I just want to validate anybody who's listening, who's experiencing that, like what you're feeling, that's valid. It's so normal and so real. But what we actually find that happens, and what's awesome, is that there's a lot of evidence and research to support this, not just on the internet, through research studies, but I see it all the time in practice, is this concept of, or this, what happens is called habituation. And what that means is, if I told you, Emily, that you could have, what's your favorite food?
Tacos.
tacos, right? If I told you, Emily, okay, you can have tacos for breakfast, lunch, dinner, you can even have it for snacks if you want, what do you think might happen after a couple days, maybe, or even one day?
I'd probably get tired of tacos.
Yeah, you realistically, what would happen is you would get sick of tacos, right? You're
Mhm.
going to get to the point where you go, I can't even look at another taco. I don't want another taco. And so we see that happening all the time with clients. It's, you know, think about the first time, if anybody's married or has a, spouse, think about the first time you said, I love you. It's like, oh my gosh, I stay up at night thinking about it. I get all the warm fuzzies. It's really exciting. It's really new. But if you've been with someone for, longer than 5 minutes or a few years, it's nice to hear, but it doesn't quite have the same effect, the same allure, the same excitement. So we see that same thing happen to food, but it can take time, right? Because it is new and it's scary. And so, for someone listening and is scared of, gaining weight, I would again go back to the values and weigh out the pros and cons. Like, well, what's the alternative? You can always go back to that diet mentality. It's always going to be there. But what does that cost you in the past? And, can you learn to trust yourself?
You've said that a couple of times, Katie, and I think that's really important to know is I think sometimes we don't trust ourselves due to past experiences where, you did overeat and you felt terrible afterwards. And then the guilt shame cycle spiral
Mm-hmm.
starts and you might deal with that maybe in unhealthy ways, or you go back to that unhealthy method. And I think it's important to take a step back and be like, well, prove yourself wrong, right? Prove yourself wrong. Like you mentioned, like your body's an experiment, and practicing intuitive eating for even just like a couple of days can really be empowering, where you're like, it's empowering. This is not scary as much as that story you told yourself in your head. And like you said, over a few days, you're probably like, I can do this. I'm not going to fail, because there is no like failure per se, because it's so personal to you.
And like you said, it's just that it's a practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Similar with developing or forming a habit. You don't just wake up and the habit sticks. You maybe have a few days where you feel successful with it. You feel like it's going well, and then life happens, and you maybe don't follow that habit the way you wanted, but you learn from that experience. And then the point is that you're able to just keep going. And so it's just that it's a practice. It's not a start stop.
Exactly. It's not a start stop, that's for sure. I know you mentioned body image at the beginning of this episode, and I know this is something a lot of our listeners could resonate with, me too, personally. But I feel like a lot of times the way we feel about our bodies and the way we talk about ourselves and the way we view food and the things we do around our body image, like weighing ourselves every day, or comparison, like seeing someone's before after picture on social media, or putting food labels like foods are good or bad, or I'm good or bad, depending on what I ate. Those are habits in
Mm-hmm.
themselves, right? So what would you suggest to a listener today listening and taking a step back? How can they evaluate maybe what habits they have in their life around their own body image, food, exercise, all the things? How could they replace those with healthier habits, but in a way where it's not overwhelming? Because I think sometimes as women, we have an all or nothing mentality. Like a Monday morning, we're like, I'm going to, practice intuitive eating. I'm going to work out and I'm going to talk nice to myself. That sounds really easy, but it's not. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, I'm going to do it all at once. And
Mhm.
I think number one, it's having the awareness, right? What is the pattern that you're seeing? And you can do this by, if you're somebody who likes to journal, pen to paper, that's one way. My clients have an app that we use that they can't see the calories, they can't see the numbers that are often triggering to people. And so it's really just digital journaling. But start to build that awareness and identify what are some of the common trends, whether it's like a behavior, right, in terms of what you're eating, what you're drinking, or not eating, or not drinking, or maybe it is that thought pattern about your body image, or it's a thought pattern around, how you talk to yourself. And then once you build that awareness, pick one, pick one And it doesn't have to be big, like it can be the smallest thing. And I love to encourage people to disrupt the habit. So let's use the stepping on the scale, for example. If that has been your habit and you've identified after building that awareness, okay, anytime I step on the scale and it's not the number I quote unquote want to see, it impacts the decisions I make for the day. So I'm going to disrupt the habit. You know, maybe you're not ready to like smash your scale and throw it in the trash, which I would highly recommend. But maybe it's okay, I'm just going to put it under the sink. I'm going to actually put it away in the closet so that the next time I get that, you know, that habit kicks in, I'm getting ready to go to the shower and I step on the scale, I have to pause and think and go, oh, wait, it's in the other room. And then I remember, oh, wait, this is why I did that because it doesn't make me feel. So now I'm empowered. I'm taking that power back to make the decision. You know, you can still weigh yourself or not, but the point is, did you pause to think and reflect about why or why not?
Yeah, you totally broke the habit loop. Because I know for a lot of women, they get up in the morning, they go to the bathroom first, and then they step on the scale before they get in the shower, maybe even after they get out of the shower too, to see if it changed after they got a shower. Maybe they took a number two. Like seriously, it could be
Mm-hmm.
very triggering. I know I've worked with women before where they're like, oh, I feel so great. I have energy. I'm sleeping really well. My skin's clear. All these wonderful non-scale victories. Then they would step on the scale and be like, well, I didn't lose as much weight as I thought I was going to. And that can totally change and, minimize all of those wonderful non-scale victories. So like you said, I think it's awareness and kind of stepping back. I love the idea of journaling, even just having a piece of paper out or your notes app open on your phone,
Mm-hmm.
and to make it a habit, say, okay, for one day, I'm just going to kind of see what's triggering these thought patterns that aren't serving me and what are the habits leading up to that, and breaking that loop and creating a new trigger, a new cue, a new routine, and then really feeling that reward on the other side where it's like, wow, I feel so much better throughout the day not weighing myself, or I feel so much better, putting a limit on social media where I only look at it for so many minutes a day, or I block or silence or whatever, bless and release certain people that make you feel certain ways on
Trust me,
social
Liz.
media.
Love
Bless
it.
and release, goodbye. It's all about that. But I think sometimes actually taking the time to make yourself aware and gather the facts versus just like the feelings can be a little hard.
And you mentioned overwhelming. A lot of times I'll encourage clients like in the early stages as we're starting this intuitive eating journey is that, you know, you can just find the dots. You don't have to connect the dots right away. You can start by just seeing the dots and just, okay, interesting. And can you start to just identify them from a place of curiosity and not judgment and just recognizing, okay, interesting. Okay, interesting. Right. And as time goes on, then you can start to kind of connect them and make them mean something. But you will be amazed at how much you can learn just by simply taking a step back, you know, kind of zooming out from yourself and noticing.
And I love that you mentioned just do one at a time if you're ready to take action. Like that is just a game changer. Because when you get that win, like then it will start snowballing. Then you'll have so much wonderful momentum. But I know we want to do it all at once. And this is a journey where, and I say it all the time, where we're training for life. We're training for life, and there is no finish line. There is no finish line. I love that. Well, Katie, where can everyone connect with you and find out more about you?
I love to hang out on Instagram. My Instagram is KT Hake, Hake, or just go to katiehake.com or the podcast as well. My podcast is called Fit Friends Happy Hour.
Super. And we'll make sure to link all of that in the show notes as well. So, Katie, thanks so much for chatting with us today, friend. It was great seeing you.
Thanks for having me.
Katie, thank you so much for this conversation. Gang, everything Katie is linked in the show notes. So go listen to her show if you love it, which I know you will. Make sure to leave her a written review and 5 stars in iTunes. Oh, and P.S. If you love Habit Hack Your Health and you haven't had a chance to leave a review, please do so because it lets me know what you love about the show so I can keep showing up for you in the best way possible. So, as always, let's talk about my 3 biggest takeaways from our conversation today with Katie. And y'all have told me you love that I've done this. I've done this since day one of launching this podcast over 4 years ago, because I don't know if you're like me. A lot of times I get distracted sometimes when I'm listening to a podcast, either by text messages going off, my kids asking me a question, or I'm driving, or I'm doing the dishes, folding laundry, all the things. So I like to give you the cliff notes at the end of the episode to really just drive home the main points you need to be able to take action with today regarding your non-diet habits. So let's talk about it. My first takeaway from this conversation with Katie is, what are your values when it comes to nutrition? Now, this can be a hard question to answer because maybe you've never really thought about it, right? What are your values? Kind of like I shared in the episode. Like, my definition of food freedom and nutrition for me means like eating colorful foods that fuel my body. I know I feel so much more focused and energized when I'm eating foods that feel good and fuel my body. But also I need to fuel my soul as well with like tacos and margaritas. Not saying I'm having those like every day or every week for that matter. Well, I do have tacos every week, some variation of it. But I'm doing it so in a way that fuels my body and fuels my soul. So maybe take a step back and think about, what habits do you have around food and that affect your day to day, right? Do you want the way you eat to help you feel energized and give you fuel so you can be a patient, present mom? Kind of like that habit identity that we talk about sometimes, which hint, hint, we'll talk about in the Healthy Habit Reset later this week. And changing your food habits or taking a look at that, like Katie mentioned, doesn't mean you're dieting, right? Like, it's more of that non-diet approach and thinking about, well, what are my food values and how can my habits support who I want to be? And also, like Katie mentioned, like, I want to point out sometimes the indecision, right? You have like this idea in your head of like how you want to eat, but how do I get started? And diet culture is really complicated and confused us as far as how we should be eating. But this is very personal to you and can lead to just not making any intentional choices. So get off the indecision wagon and start taking action. Maybe even sit and journal on this to help you really decide what your values are when it comes to nutrition. Next, we don't trust ourselves because of past dieting experiences, right? I've seen so many diets out there. I've seen so many of my girlfriends do them. Me personally, watching my mom, like, it's all over, right? It's all over the place as far as like all the different diets out there and what you're exposed to on social media now too. And I think a lot of times this derails us from taking any action because we don't trust ourselves due to past experiences, especially when it comes to dieting, because we're like, man, it never stuck. Well, it's because diets don't work, right? We need to have that training for life mentality where we're taking care of our health, our habit identity is in place, our nutritional values, we know what those are. So realistically, as you're thinking about, trusting yourself again with how you eat. Like I mentioned, journaling on your values is really good, but maybe even a pros and con list is a really great action item to take, like Katie mentioned, to really think about what's the worst case and what's the best case scenario if I eat this way, or if I eat that way, or if I don't do this, or if I do this. And give yourself a little more grace because it's not going to happen over time. It's a practice, just like a habit. It's not going to be the same every day. So sometimes you need to pivot and really think about those values first and foremost and let go of the distrust that you have with yourself because of past dieting experiences and really lead with that gentle nutrition or non-dieting approach like Katie mentioned. And lastly, awareness. So I love the idea of taking a look at some habit loops you have around food or your body image, right? And really think about just one thing at a time, right? Just 1% change, 1% better when it comes to your food habits can really lead to long-term success and sustainability instead of trying to do it all at once. Like, how many times on a Monday have you been like, well, I'm going to follow this really strict diet and I'm going to work out and I'm going to set this mindset work for myself. It can be so overwhelming. overwhelming. So maybe you just kind of take a look back, journal, and kind of recognize some habit loops. I love the example that Katie gave when we talked about a habit loop around weighing yourself, right? Maybe you've established those values around nutrition, you're eating colorful foods, you're not restricting yourself, and you're feeling great, right? You're feeling so good. You're focused on so many other non-scale victories, and you step on the scale and then it totally just messes with your mind. I've had clients do that. I've personally felt that way before as well, but we can't let that number on the scale define us. So maybe you have a habit loop where you step on the scale every morning or various times throughout the day. Maybe you just take a step back and think about what is triggering that. Maybe it's turning on the shower in the morning, like Katie mentioned. Just put the scale under your sink and maybe just weigh yourself later in the day if you're really interested in that data, or just one day a week, and create a new habit loop around that. So instead of stepping on the scale, your trigger is still the same, turning on the shower, but maybe now your new routine is you're doing a little stretch as you're letting that water warm up, and your reward on the other side is you feel a little bit more centered. You're not triggered by that number on the scale. Sometimes we need the facts, not just the feelings, and sometimes we get so caught up in the feelings, and the scale can really derail that as well. So think about some habit loops you have around and disrupt around, your body image or things that aren't serving you. Disrupt that habit loop and change just one thing at a time so it's not so overwhelming. I could have talked to you forever, Katie. Thank you again so much for joining us on the show, gang. Again, go connect with Katie. Everything Katie Hake is linked in the show notes for you, especially go listen to Fit Friends Happy Hour. I was on her show a little bit ago talking about what else? Habit hacking your health and that atomic habits for women philosophy. Now, gang, I hope to see you in the Healthy Habit Reset later this week. If you're listening to this after we've already done it live, like I said, we do it live 4 times a year, but you can always watch it and catch it at bit.ly/free reset masterclass. Come join us, learn the method, learn how to pivot your habits, and of course, get that discount code for our signature program as well while we're there. All right, friend, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I'll see you later this week for Habit Hack Thursday. Hey girl, real quick before you go, did you know I have a secret podcast where I talk all about why most habit strategies don't work for us women? Spoiler alert, it's not our fault. Visit bit.ly/atomic habits for women. It's linked in the show notes to access my secret podcast series and have your biggest aha moment about why and how women have to do habits differently. And if you love the podcast, the number one way you can thank me is to leave a rating and review in iTunes. That way more mamas can find the show. Love and appreciate you, friend. We'll see you next time.